In Haiti, fears are growing that the capital, Port-au-Prince, could fully fall into the hands of powerful gangs, despite the presence of Kenyan police on the ground. The Kenyans are leading a multinational security mission, helping Haitian police to push the gangs back, but they're struggling. This week, one of their officers went missing after he was ambushed by suspected gang members. And this comes a month after the first Kenyan policeman was killed in Haiti. DW's Felix Maringa reports from Kajiado County, that's south of Kenya's capital, Nairobi, as the realities of this dangerous mission hit home.
A community mourns as Officer Samuel Tompoi is given final honors and laid to rest. He was killed while on patrol in Haiti, sent there by the Kenyan government to help keep the peace. He leaves behind a wife and 2 children. Naomi Tompoi says she doesn't know how she'll manage without his support.
He was our only hope, so it's not easy. It's not easy because he was the one working. We never slept on empty stomachs. The children were getting all their needs met because their dad had a job. He was also taking care of the parents. He was looked up to for everything at home, so it's not easy at all, now that he's gone.
Despite his dangerous job patrolling Kenya's borders, she believes that if he hadn't been sent abroad, he'd still be alive today. Among his fellow officers, Samuel died a hero in the line of duty, befitting a 21-gun salute. To his family, he died too young. They wish he would have stayed a little bit longer. And to some Kenyans present at the burial, online and offline, they think he died in a war that had very little significance to the country. Politicians paying their respects at the funeral voiced their concerns about the mission.
If America will have issues in defunding, as the Trump administration looks like is likely to do, then we would not like to see our officers exposed. When the uncertainty about funding is still hanging over their heads, our officers will be exposed if they're underfunded, if they're under-equipped. So this is what we'd like to say today, that if this uncertainty prevails, then we must consider as a nation disengagement, unless the UN takes over this mission.
The international mission has been struggling to contain the violence, which the UN says has worsened over the past year. Analysts say the mission was ill-conceived.
Boots on the ground, pacifying and putting down these gangs, that mission was never going to succeed from a brute force perspective. From a military use of force perspective, we were never going to succeed because the numbers overwhelmingly were against us. But in terms of guarding and taking back key infrastructure, key government infrastructure, allowing the Haitians to have a semblance of government that was in charge, we were going to succeed.
Kenyan authorities say they're sticking to their commitments to the officers and their international partners. But with reports of another officer killed in the Caribbean, doubts about Kenya's role in Haiti continue.
To get a better sense of the current status of Kenya's mission in Haiti, we've invited Dr. Hassan Khannenje onto the program. He is the director of Horn Institute, that is a security think tank based in Nairobi. It's very good to have you on DW News Africa. Can we start out with you just telling us about what is the status of Kenya's deployment at present? How many officers are there and what missions are they conducting?
The current deployment is about slightly more than 600, police officers from Kenya working, within the framework of the multinational, security support mission in Haiti, in which, of course, Kenya is taking the lead. And they're working in collaboration, with the Haitian police to try and fight back, especially the problem of gangs that literally have bedeviled, most of Port-au-Prince for the better part of the last few years. And of course, we know it's extremely challenging, task, considering, I think, the amount of work that needs to be done for them to be successful.
We're hearing that Port-au-Prince may soon entirely fall to criminal gangs, who we understand currently control about 85% of the capital. What have the Kenyan officers achieved in the time that they've been deployed? And this is in no way meant to downplay the contribution that's been made by Kenyan officers who've been risking their lives to help the people of Haiti.
I think one thing that has been notable is they managed, with the support, of course, of the Haitian police to secure some strategic assets, especially critical infrastructure, to ensure that the country, is still operating and can still be able to allow, basic communication with the outside world. But of course, we cannot expect less than 1,000 police officers from Kenya to be able to police a country of more than 10 million people. It's going to require a lot more commitment, not just from Kenya, but also those people who are actually committed to playing a role within the Haitian theater.
Dr. Khannenje, the UN's designated Haiti expert, William O'Neill, recently returned from his visit to the country. He spoke about the police being what he calls woefully under-equipped. Let's have a listen to him, and I want to get your views on this.
They really need more mobility in terms of air to move around by helicopter. They need better vehicles that are more apt to deal with Haitian topography, both the cities, densely populated cities with narrow streets and very crowded neighborhoods, and also as the gangs have extended into the areas outside the capital, which are very hilly, some very steep hills, narrow paths that aren't really conducive to the type of vehicles, to moving the type of vehicles the MSS or the Haitian National Police have. They also need more night vision goggles, they need more body armor, they need more mobility. They need more and more flexibility in their ability to operate.
I mean, just your response to that, and perhaps from what you're hearing, will the deployed officers receive any of that anytime soon?
Right now, there's no indication that that is forthcoming. And I think it's important to note that some of the equipment that is going to be required to operate in that theater is supposed to come from partners, especially the United States, Canada, as well as others who already have sufficient equipment and can be able to do that. Now, considering the kind of environment, political environment that's going on, of course, within the coalition of the willing, I think a decision making with regard to some of these important aspects, of course, has been slow. But what we expect is that the coalition of the willing that are now funding, the mission, are going to provide equipment and as well as funds to be able to make this mission successful. Because in the absence of appropriate equipment as well as facilities and arms and weapons, then it makes or leaves the missions, pretty much a sitting duck and at the mercy of gangs, which of course is not something that is going to augur well with contributing countries such as Kenya.
As you're referencing the coalition of the willing, the leader of that coalition presumably is the United States, and funding remains the issue with this mission in Haiti. The US has been the largest donor. What do we know about the Trump administration's interest in continuing to fund the mission?
While there is an appearance of the Trump administration being a little bit more inward and not really focusing on what is happening outside of the United States, as well as other places, maybe in Asia, I think to the extent that the new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was at pains to explain the role of the U.S., in case, of course, he's confirmed when it comes to Haiti, I think it points to a fact that the U.S. is still going to be engaged in Haiti. But also the important policy of Trump, which is on migration, which is a big agenda item. They are today trying to remove what they think is the illegal migrants in the United States. And I think they're very keen to keep Haitians in Haiti so they don't have to deal with that problem, in the United States. And so I think for those reasons, the Trump administration is going to be engaged in Haiti, perhaps not to the extent to which previous administration may have been, but they have enough incentive to ensure that there's a semblance of peace and stability as well as, governance in Haiti, so that actually the problem doesn't escalate in ways in which it's going to push refugees into North America.
As you would know very well, Dr. Khannenje, there were a lot of critics in Kenya about this deployment, all these months later, have they been proved right?
Yeah, to some extent they have, but to some extent they haven't. They have in the sense that perhaps there's a widespread, understanding, not just in Kenya, but globally, that there isn't a lot that's been accomplished nationwide when it comes to securing Haiti. But also then the success that has been registered, but the optimism that I think that deployment inspired among, Haitian citizens and civilians, both inside Haiti and outside, is a success in itself, because then it can mobilize public opinion, both international as well as, in Haiti, to support that kind of engagement if it's properly, and sufficiently funded, but also they have appropriate numbers of personnel and equipment. I think there is a desire by Haitians and Haitian citizens to support that mission. And this is a little bit different from the previous deployments where you've seen a lot of hostility from Haitians themselves.
On that note, remind us then why Kenya agreed to lead this mission. What did Kenya gain from this?
Deployment is, rather peace diplomacy is a critical pillar of Kenya's foreign policy. It is something that the country, I think, has been undertaking for the better part of its independence history. However, this was also, I think, catalyzed by the increasing closeness in terms of relationship between Washington and Nairobi, as epitomized by the visit that Kenya's president, made to Washington. And I think that deepened relationship and the urging of the United States, it made it easier for Kenya to make that deployment, not just as part of its peace diplomacy, but fundamentally as a demonstration of the increasingly closer relations between Nairobi and Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and I'll just make the point that that visit was with the previous administration, with President Joe Biden. I guess my last question will really be, will there need to be a rethink about the deployment if the reality sets in and that entire capital falls to the gangs? What will happen to the Kenyans who are deployed in Haiti, for example?
If the capital falls, then that means there is no government that is legitimate to be able to deal with. And what we see is then the Kenyan deployment, the Kenyan mission will actually end because this is a government, to government kind of arrangement. It's a UN sanctioned but not UN funded mission. And so in the absence of a legitimate authority in Port-au-Prince, then there will be no reasonable justification for the Kenyan mission to continue engagement in Haiti at that point. But it's also going then to put the men and women who've been deployed in Haiti in harm's way, both Kenyans as well as others who may be involved at that time.
All right, that is Dr. Hassan Khannenje talking to us from Nairobi. We appreciate your insights here on DW News Africa.
Thanks for having me.